Hello and welcome to the Game Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vecenie. Today, Bryce Simon is in the building. Bryce is over there in, I'm guessing, cold Kansas? Extremely
Uh,
cold Kansas?
Not extremely cold. It's been better, but it is rainy, Kansas, actually, the
Yes.
last 24 hours or so, which is nice. Whenever you're from an agriculture community, you take moisture in any way you can get it, any time of the year you can get it. So all
Oh,
the
sure.
farmers, which involve my dad and my father-in-law, are happy right now.
I get it. I get it. I don't want the rain, though. I get that
I
it's good for the community. I don't want the rain, though.
I love the rain. I think it's very peaceful and relaxing, and so, interesting.
Yeah, not a rain guy. Okay, so today, our agenda is we're going to talk about Joel Embiid being injured in some capacity. We'll try and sort through what we think that means. We're going to talk about Zack LaVine being out for the season with one of the strangest press releases I have seen for quite some time in terms of announcing an out for the season injury. We're going to talk about the Brooklyn Nets, who have had a bizarre number of trade leaks regarding their players, and I don't understand what's going on there, just kind of point blank, and want to kind of continue to sort through that a little bit. Finally, we're going to give some trade deadline predictions. We'll take some questions at the end, I'm sure. We might touch on like some teams in that middle portion of the Eastern Conference as we talk about the 76ers, like the Cavs, the Knicks, surging teams that have a real chance to maybe move the Sixers down the pegging order, whatever it is. I
Pecking,
don't know.
pecking.
Pecking order. Yeah. I don't know what words are at this point. We're pegging teams in certain spots and they're going down the pecking order. My brain, breaks half the time. Okay. Did you have a nice little weekend, Bryce? You were telling me earlier that you were watching all sorts of college basketball this weekend. It was great.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of really good games on. Duke, North Carolina, Kansas, Houston. We were talking about the Baylor, Iowa State game, other draft prospects all across the board. And I was telling you, it was kind of like March Madness week. I love the first 4 days of March Madness. It's legitimately the best 4 days of the
In
year.
sports.
Yeah, in sports. I was fortunate enough, I got to play in it a couple times. So there's some nostalgia there. One shining moment video is like the coolest thing ever to me. I definitely, not many things get me in my feels, Sam. That every year gets me in my feels. Our first highlight video after my junior season at American, our assistant coach, shout out Kieran Donahue, getting to head coach Old Dominion right now because of everything going on with Coach Jones's health. Prayers up. Put together a highlight video, and he used One Shining Moment as one of the songs in the background. And it's just, it's just the nostalgia of it. So anyway, I have it on the TV. I have my computer on my lap, and I'm just watching two games all day long. And it was a great day of college basketball. And luckily, I have a beautiful wife who allows me to do this.
That's amazing. That rules so hard. I went to the Southeast Melbourne game in, Melbourne Bay. Not a crazy amount yesterday. Knowing that there's a crazy amount of madness coming this weekend with the trade deadline, I decided to be disconnected a little bit at least. So today will be a big tape catch-up day for me. Watched a few movies, hung out. My wife and I got a kitten yesterday. It was very nice.
Ooh.
So yeah, it was nice.
Real quick, we don't have to do this now, but before we hang up the episode, I did tell my wife, hey, yesterday you let me do my thing. Tonight, after I record with Sam, let's watch Ted Lasso, a few episodes. We're like in season 2 right now. And then I said,
Sure.
let's watch a movie. Let's watch a movie tonight. So I think as we go throughout the episode of a movie recommendation you can give me and Ranny to watch this evening. No kids around. This will be after we put them to bed. If it's whatever. So be thinking on that. And if anybody's watching live, I'll take recommendations from the chat as well.
This is good. The chat needs to give Bryce movie recommendations. The kitten's name. So we have 3 animals in the house. They are Penny, Elaine, and Jerry. We haven't decided on a cat name yet. We're still working through options here. We've thrown some things at the wall. I will be sure to keep everybody informed. But let's go and talk about Joel Embiid now.
Okay.
Joel Embiid has been diagnosed with what is being described by Shams Charania and Joe Varden as a displaced flap of the meniscus in his left knee. and is considering surgery. Two sources briefed on his prognosis told The Athletic. A displaced flap is considered to be a type of tear of the meniscus, according to orthopedic knee specialists. Embiid, his doctors, and the 76ers are continuing to discuss whether the course of action is to rest and rehab the injury or to undergo a procedure that would require him to miss extended time. Look, this seems bad to me. Part of this is like the 76ers are not very good at describing injuries and explaining injuries. This goes all the way back to the Sam Hinkie era, probably before that even. So we're not getting a lot of information there. Now we're getting information from sourcing and reporting, and all of this seems quite complicated. Brian Sutterer, who is an injury doctor on Twitter, said, straight up, a displaced flap is a tear, not an injury. The meniscus is torn. Two, if you tell a sports doc someone has a quote unquote displaced flap, those words are often used to describe something that needs surgery. Three, if rest/rehab is still an option, then they really aren't communicating this in a good way. All of that is to be said. This does not seem, to me at least, like a short-term injury, or at the very least, something that will allow Joel Embiid to get back to 100% health sooner rather than later, right? Like, even if he returns and like tries to play through it, it feels very much like this is not a deal where, he's going to be at 100% for the rest of the season, right? So I'll ask you, where do we feel like this leaves the 76ers? Where do we feel like this leaves everything as we try and figure out what happens with them?
Yeah, so I don't like to get into medical stuff because obviously that's not what I do. I do have experience with knee injuries. I've tore my ACL 3 times in college. Usually with ACL injuries, you tear meniscuses, like one of them specifically. Like I know exactly what this feels like. This doesn't sound like a rest injury, right? Whenever there's a flap, whatever the wording is, it sounds like either you have to go in and shave it or stitch it or whatever. And then the time frame on those is different depending on what you choose to do based on that type of stuff. But either way, I've never talked like, it doesn't sound like that's a rest type of thing. So anyway, I've just kind of been working under the assumption we do not see Joel Embiid again this season. That's where I'm at.
Maybe that's speculative, to be clear.
Yes.
And I'm not far off of that either. Like, I think it's going to be some time until we see Joel, and how the 76ers survive maybe might play a role in how he ends up returning. But I'm with you that I think this seems, based on the reporting, not from any sort of, reporting that I've done personally or you've done personally. We're speculating based on all of the wording that's coming out. This seems like a longer term thing to me.
Because my thing is, even if it's rest, you're talking a couple weeks, 3 weeks. I mean, it seems significant enough that you'd have to rest for a while. If it's the shorter term surgery, you're looking at 4 weeks to 6 weeks. And I guess my thought process there is then, like you just alluded to, where are the Sixers at, Sam? That do you want to rush Joel Embiid back from a meniscus injury? I believe that's
the big thing.
The second one in this knee, specifically this knee. There's been injuries to other parts of the body, the other leg, those type of things. Do you bring him back in a situation where now you're 6th in the East, or you're in the play-in? Are you bringing Joel Embiid back to do that? And so that's where I've just kind of been, okay, if I put myself in the shoes of the Sixers front office, I would just kind of move forward, because we have 4 days to figure this out, right? Like, that's the other thing. We don't know how quick he's going to be back. So I'm just thinking, how would I operate the trade deadline for the Philadelphia 76ers with what we know right now? And I do think it would change my calculation a little bit in terms of what I was going after. And I think that's where we're ready to dive into, is how does this change things up for the Sixers over the next 4 days?
So I think it unequivocally, it changes your thought process, but I don't know if it actually changes the end conclusions, because the whole thing for the Philadelphia 76ers this year has been trying to maintain their long-term assets so that they can go out in the summer and potentially make a bigger splash to go get a star that is currently not available on the trade market. Like the trade market right now seems quite quiet in terms of going to get like your third star next to Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid. To do that, the 76ers need to really only go after expirings or guys that have like real flexibility, such as like a Bojan Bogdanovic, somebody like that, who has a contract that is like very minimally guaranteed next season, doesn't really affect their flexibility long term. So when I look at this, it feels like things for me don't change much, right? Like it's
So,
not like
but would you
things like
still would you trade for Boyan or DeRozan? Because those guys made sense, right? They weren't the third star necessarily,
yeah,
but they were on contracts where then you could like Boyan, you could either let go. I mean, not like that's not the right terminology, but take the 2 million or you can exercise it, keep it fully guarantee it, and use it as a trade asset.
yeah.
My thing is like, I don't think you do that now. Like you either go for a third star right now, which it doesn't sound like is there, or the other option is like, do they consider trading off these expirings now for assets? Like, do you need Marcus Morris on the roster? Do you need Nick Batum on the roster? Do you need those guys? Because you weren't going to do that with Embiid in a playoff run over the next few months. So I don't think I think that's where it changes a little bit for me, or I wonder if it would change for them.
So I guess what I would say there is like I've always thought that those kinds of deals were very unlikely
Okay.
for the 76ers. I don't think they were going to give up what the Chicago Bulls seemingly want for DeMar DeRozan in a like significant deal,
Gotcha.
right?
Okay.
Like I don't think they were going to give up like a first round pick and a pick swap or something like that for DeMar DeRozan.
Gotcha.
I think that they would have hoarded those assets in order to hope for a bigger name or a bigger star in order to come available eventually, right?
Gotcha. Yep.
The deals that always made more sense to me for them were something along the lines of a Bojan Bogdanovic, a Gordon Hayward, I guess you could say like a Malcolm Brogdon, because Malcolm you could say is like a bigger expiring contract next season in the off season. So you could just like use him to salary match like in a bigger trade if somebody decides that they want that. But even then, those are even somewhat difficult to do. Like I've never thought like D'Angelo Russell like made a lot of sense for them. I've always just kind of thought this was likely to be a quieter deadline for them. And I know that like 76ers fans are not super enthusiastic to hear that. I just always kind of thought that it was always going to be like we're going and getting things on the margins more than anything, as opposed to going and getting things that like are star level difference makers. Like the DeJounte Murray thing, like never lined up for me. Like I said, Zack LaVine never lined up for me. DeRozan never lined up for me. Pascal Siakam like never really lined up for me. OG Anunoby I think made a lot of sense for them, but they were going to have to make a decision on like, do we want to pay him and do we think he's good enough to be a third star? And I don't know if that's the case, frankly. So I wonder on the other side now, do the 76ers kind of similarly to what you're saying, Marcus Morris, Robert Covington, guys like that, they have a lot of expiring deals. Is there a chance that if they feel like Joel is just straight up not coming back this year and they're like not bringing back Tobias Harris, like they feel like Tobias Harris is not coming back, do they maybe like try and sell Tobias Harris to somebody? Do they try and like get like, do you try and do like an expiring kind of deal with, I don't know, like Detroit or somebody for Tobias Harris, right? Maybe you do Tobias for Joe Harris, James Wiseman, and like a pick or something like that. Maybe Detroit is interested in Tobias Harris and Tobias Harris, in the offseason, and this would allow you to get his bird rights. And you can then pay him what is necessary to keep him. I don't know. Like, I wonder if that opens up that kind of world a little bit more, if they think Joel is just like not going to be there, where you can get even more assets
Yes.
to use in a trade this offseason to go get your star that you seem very set on trying to go get to work with Joel and Tyrese.
Yeah, and that's the thing, like, I don't know how many, like, I don't think you're getting first round picks or anything like that, but like Detroit has a very quality second round pick. It's not their own, but it's the worst of like the Wizards and the Grizzlies or something like that. It's going to be a high second round pick. And I'm not saying I would do this for Detroit, but that's what I wonder if they do. You go get an extra second round pick, and then maybe it makes it easier to trade some other first round picks for the third star that you're talking about, whoever that ends up being. And then also, I'm not saying you punt on the season, but do you get Terquavion Smith some minutes? You get Ricky Council some minutes. You get Jaden Springer some minutes. Some of those guys some time on the floor to find out, okay, can these guys help us once we get past this season, or can they not? Just find out what you have. I don't want them to completely punt on the season, but it's like, I feel like depending on what their intel is on Joel and his potential return or not, I wonder if that's a path. That's just such a quick transition in essentially 7 days, though. Like, that's a hard mentality shift to make those.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it's super, super quick. The other thing I will say is, if I was them, and I'm sure they're doing this, I would still be on the phone searching, like, in case that third star does come available, the name that we don't know that maybe ends up being on the market, they can still make that move right now. Like, you could bring him in, play that person with Tyrese Maxey the rest of the year, and have him in place for the start of the offseason into next season. I don't see that because I don't like any of the names necessarily either, but I don't think this puts him out of making that move now as opposed to the offseason if the right name and the right price becomes available.
Yeah. So, like, what if you did something like this to Philly, where it was, and I'm pulling this up as we talk about it. I'm trying to pull this up functionally as we talk about it. Can you see this? Yes. So you do something like Joe Harris, James Wiseman, Marcus Sasser, and that early second round pick for Tobias Harris.
I mean,
if the Pistons, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I would do that if I'm the 76ers, assuming and I say that so quickly because I think Marcus Sasser is good at basketball. So
no, I think he's pretty good too. I just think that they're not gonna, like, I don't think the Sixers will just like give up Tobias Harris for nothing, because he's valuable for them this season, right? But if you're saying, okay, we have a really young point guard here in Marcus Sasser, we could potentially add him to like another deal down the road at some point for a star. If we think that another team thinks he's good, we can get this early second round pick, something like that. And then you get the expirings. It doesn't really impact your cap space this summer. It just adds 2.6 million. The Pistons, if they want to get a real four-man in the mix, which based on the reporting, it seems like that's something. I wonder if something like this makes sense if the 76ers know more about Joel Embiid's injury than what has been presented. If they think he's going to be back, like if they think he can get back to 100% by the playoffs, then you absolutely keep Tobias Harris. Like there's no question here, right? Like you don't mess around with that. If you think Joel is back by the playoffs, you make a playoff run and you go for it. But if you feel like that Joel is not going to be above 9, or is not going to be at like 90% or higher in the playoffs, do you look to do something like that? Because Tobias, genuinely, like, for as much shit as Tobias Harris gets, Tobias Harris right now is shooting something like 51, 35, 88 or something, while averaging 17 points per game. He's like a tremendous, like, impactful third scorer who can play off the ball and like be able to do stuff. I don't know. Like, I feel like that's an interesting one. The other piece of it is like, yeah, that's a terrible deal for Detroit, because if Tobias wants to be there, he can just sign there rather than giving up Sasser. Yeah, that's right. But there is the real factor of getting his bird rights, which is valuable, although they have like crazy cap space. So I guess they don't really need to do that. Yeah, I mean, it's more about keeping Tobias long term above all, and like trying to get more bodies in for the end of this season in order to help with the floor spacing, help Cade and Jaden be impactful in some way, help them get good reps, which they just haven't gotten this season.
They need the
I don't
Pistons
know,
need a
like,
four. The Pistons need a real four man. Like I go back and forth on whether I
yeah,
think that should be Tobias Harris at 31 years old and all of that stuff. And I don't know what the money would be for the next contract, everything like that. We've seen it play out over the last couple of weeks with Mike Muscala playing at the four. That when they have a four man or then even a five man at times that can space the floor, that team looks more functional offensively. It looks better. It looks more realistic. I still like Isaiah Stewart. He's a third big that should be playing 60 to 70% of his minutes at the five. I've said that for a couple years now. So again, I'm not sold that it's Tobias, but they do need somebody like that.
yeah, and look, like I'm not sitting here saying that I think this is a good idea for Detroit. I don't. I'm just basing this off of reporting that they really want a four man, and Tobias, if they know that he is not going to go back to Philly, and if they know Joel is not going to be back in some way, shape, or form this season, do you look to move Tobias Harris in a move like that where you're giving up a first, you're giving up an early second, basically, you're giving up a late first, you're giving up an early second. You have all of your awesome young players in place. You want to try and surround them with some competence. I'm not saying it's a move I'd make. I'm saying I can see it being a move that a certain type of general manager would make.
If you took Sasser out of the deal, I'd be a lot more inclined to consider that just because, I mean, you can only have so much young talent on the roster they can develop anyway, as valuable as that early second round pick. I would consider a little bit more. I think ideally, like we just got the framework of what we're talking about, though. If Philly was in this situation 4 days from now, couldn't you go get something like some sort of asset for Tobias Harris? And there are some teams out there that could use, like you just rattled off, a guy, in Tobias Harris that can come in and fill a role for your team.
Yeah, and like the other piece of this is like, are we sure? Like, what if Tobias Harris was willing to like do an extension?
Yeah,
right. Like that's his number is big enough to where he could do an extension on basically anything. Like I don't know. I wonder if that's an interesting potential outcome at the end of the day. But look, that would require Joel to be hurt. And we're just kind of trying to figure out where all this could go for the Philadelphia 76ers. And frankly, I don't know because they're being circumspect about the Joel injury. We don't know a lot of detail about it. We're still all trying to figure out, we're all trying to find the guy who did this, right? Like that's where we're at here. And anything else on the Sixers? I mean, as we try and figure this out, where do we think that without Joel for, let's say, 25 more games, something like that, 20 more games, maybe he comes back in, a month and a half or something. Where do we think that leaves them in the Eastern Conference?
So that's where I was about to go as well, because as I sit here and say, who knows where they are if he misses 4 to 6 weeks. So they're at fifth right now at time of recording, but they're still 4 up on Orlando and Indiana at 6 and 7. They're 4.5 up on Miami and then like 8 up on the 9 seed. I mean, if he missed 25 games, though, there's a chance that team falls into the play-in. And again, it's like, okay,
ooh,
what's
man,
that?
falls into the play-in. Jesus.
You don't think so? Without Joel Embiid?
So they are currently,
they're 5 games ahead. No, they're 4 games ahead of Orlando and Indiana.
yeah, in Miami is the 7 right now, and they're 4.5 ahead of them. I guess it's possible.
I didn't say
I'll be honest.
likely.
I hadn't really thought about them falling into the play-in.
You said 25 games. That's a lot of games. I mean, is it so what if they went? Are they going to do much better than 500 over a 25 game span without Joel Embiid?
So without Joel on the court this season, they are a plus 1.7 team per 100 possessions. good portion of those minutes as well, like, have recently been in the games where like Tyrese Maxey's missed a couple here, Tobias Harris has missed a couple here. Like, they lost by 15 to Brooklyn with 4 starters out, right? Like, uh, it's kind of like a Nets situation last year, right? Like the Nets got rid of Kyrie and KD, and they still like basically survived. I wonder if, like, let's say Philly is a 500 team the rest of the way over those 25 games. Let's say that they're a 13-12 team. That still gets them to
It's close.
43 and 30 with
So then
9 or
it's
10 games left in the season.
so I
I
guess
mean,
that's
in
the
that
aspect,
case,
right?
like, yeah, the Heat would have to go on or the Magic, let's call it the Heat or the Magic, would have to go on like a 18-7 run. I don't know, man. That's
Okay. No, you're
like,
right.
I think they finish in the top 6. What you're saying is like not an impossibility. I think that they would survive enough to where they would stay in the top 6.
No, that's fair, because as you do the math and think about what those other teams would have to do to make that jump, that makes a little more sense. Like, I'm just looking at their schedule. They have the Warriors, they have the Hawks, they have the Wizards. They go on a tough stretch: Heat, Knicks, Cavs, Bucks, Celtics. But then you still have some games against the Hornets, the Grizzlies. So I think what it comes down to is, do they win all of those games?
Yeah.
Like, do they win the games against the teams you have to beat to at least be 500? I
Yeah.
guess I was thinking if they go 500, they're only 4 games up. Those other teams are probably going to pass them. Two of those other two teams would have to get on a hot streak, both of them. Still, then you're in the 7th seed and you have 10 games of Joel back before to try to maybe get into the top 6. So I don't know.
So we're kind of operating under the idea that the 76ers know something, right? That they have a feel for this. They have a better feel for this than what we do. They certainly have a better feel for this than what we do. That's not an exaggeration or a lie. But let's say they are operating with imperfect information, because it could be anywhere from 10 games to 20 games to the rest of the season, right? Like, if no decisions have been made yet, they don't know what that will look like at the end of the day. So let's say that they're working with imperfect information. If you are working with imperfect information and you feel like there is a chance that Joel can go in the playoffs, what would you do at the deadline?
I would then still make those moves that we talked about that I was saying I wouldn't make if he was out for the season. So, I mean, I think you're still always looking for the third star, no matter what. I think whether he's hurt or not, or misses one game or the rest of the season, whatever, I think and we don't think that person's out there. So we'll shove that aside. I wouldn't do the Tobias Harris deal that we talked about, I know that wasn't the exact deal, but I would look to make a move on the margins. Boyan, whoever that is, that player that's going to come in and help you win games. And then also, if it's 20 games, 25, maybe you call up one of these teams that has an extra center and see if you can get some minutes from, like, I don't know, whoever's on the market at center that can come in and play those minutes. And then, I guess they don't need a backup with Paul Reed, but I would find somebody to, play those minutes until Joel gets him back. So I would make those 2 moves. Whatever move you were going to make to help booster things now while keeping the long-term flexibility, and then find somebody to eat up those center minutes for 10, 15, 20 games, whatever it's going to be. I would still go for it then, I guess, is my point.
Yeah, if that's the case and they're working with imperfect information, I would try and buy on the margins and make it so that I still have immense flexibility in the summer and keep my cap sheet clear. Gordon Hayward is the name that makes a ton of sense to me. Could you do something like Gordon Hayward for Marcus Morris, Robert Covington, and 3 second-round picks?
So then,
something along those lines.
What would you have to add to that to get Nick Richards in the deal also?
I don't know if I would want Nick Richards, because he signed for $5 million next year.
You don't think you could just get rid of that if you needed to? Or
yeah, you could.
Like the reason I say Nick Richards, I know the flexibility, but the number's so small. I just feel like it wouldn't be that hampering, especially if you felt like he could help. I'm not saying Nick Richards is like, can he help you win a couple games? Can he eat up those minutes while Joel isn't out?
He can, and he would be useful for them. Honestly, I think Paul Reed is better than he is.
Sure.
I think he probably costs like a good second round pick and like another second round pick. And I don't know that they have enough like asset capital really
Sure.
to do that. Like if they would be willing to throw in Nick Richards, if I threw in, Jaden Springer or something like that, I would probably do that. But otherwise, I'm just going to check this to see if the math works. I don't even know if it does, to be honest with you. It does. I don't know if I would. Yeah, I don't know if I would do that. Yeah, like I don't see. Grape Ape brings up like teams want Nick Richards. He isn't a throw in. Like he's not a throw in.
No,
That's right.
no, and
And I don't think Jaden Springer's all that good, frankly. So like to me, it's if I'm doing this, I'm doing it like Gordon Hayward probably, and hoping I can get Gordon Hayward for 3 second round picks.
to be clear, I did ask, I said, what else would it take to get Nick Richards, guys? So I know that I didn't say just throw in Nick Richards to the trade. I was just asking,
100%.
how could I also get Nick Richards? Like if we're doing a deal with Charlotte to get Gordon Hayward, which I love that idea. I think Gordon Hayward's a really quality player to add to a team that's trying to compete. I was just saying, what else would it take to then get Nick Richards in that deal? Because I knew it was for $5 million. Because as you countered right away, you either have to get somebody on very, very small money or somebody that's on an expiring deal if you're going to go down the road that I'm talking about in terms of getting a center to come play for 15, 20. Maybe they can just make it work without one, right? Like you start Paul Reed and play Mo Bamba off the bench and play Tobias and some of those guys at the 5 and just go small for minutes, and you just figure it out till Joel gets back.
Yeah, and like the problem even with like a name like Bruce Brown is that Bruce Brown, I think, is going to get a first round pick. Like I think some team will give up a late first round pick for Bruce Brown. So you probably get outbid in that scenario if you're the Philadelphia 76ers. So even a name like that where you have his optional contract situation, that probably doesn't work. Bojan Bogdanovic, that probably doesn't work, I don't think. To me, I want to keep all my options open for the summer and making sure I have cap space, either for free agency or a trade. Let's say something crazy happens with the Clippers and Paul George comes available. Let's say something crazy happens with the Celtics, Drew Holiday comes available. You just never know what's going to happen in the summer for free agency. And then you also never know what's going to be available and what teams will want to do when they're put into a position where they have to trade a star. And once everything happens with the deadline and once everything happens with the playoffs, there's just going to be more options, I think, kind of out there. So yeah, we're going to have to kind of wait and see what happens there.
Yeah, it will be interesting. Somebody said it earlier, like, are we going to find out? I'm interested, Monday, do we get a report of some sort of timetable or what the plan of action is? Or, I listened to podcasts all weekend of, they're going to take the weekend to find out, what's wrong with this. What's the course of action? What's the rehab? Is it surgery? All of those things. And so I'm interested what day that news drops. And then all of a sudden they're a very interesting team. Because again, based on that news and what the plan of action is and all of that, could really dictate, not crazy. I think we've kind of walked ourselves into that, right? Like it's not going to drastically change, but it could be a subtle shift in what they end up doing at the deadline.
I think that's right. Okay, let's take a quick commercial break. Then we will be back and we're going to talk about Chicago because I find that whole thing extremely interesting. Okay, we're back. The Chicago Bulls had news break over the weekend. Zack LaVine is going to miss the rest of the season. The press release reads like this: after seeking additional medical opinions in consultation with the Chicago Bulls training staff and medical staff, guard Zack LaVine and Clutch Sports Group have elected surgery on LaVine's right foot as the next step in his recovery process. Surgery is anticipated this week upcoming. LaVine will be out 4 to 6 months. Updates will be provided as necessary. First and foremost, guard Zack LaVine and Clutch Sports Group. Like, why is that in the press release?
I thought that was interesting as well. I don't normally pay attention to that stuff, but the wording definitely stood out just because I thought it was interesting. So I don't know. I don't know what to think about it. I don't know that it matters, but it definitely stood out to me. It caught my eye.
It also caught my eye that this weekend there was it Chris Haynes that said something like the Detroit Pistons are still the most likely suitor for Zack LaVine, and then this happened. I'm not saying that that's why. I don't know anything that's going on there. I'm just saying I found that funny that was the case.
Yeah, it was. And then so that got aggregated and people were throwing out trades. And then I had to get in on that. I was like, ho, because Zach Lowe was catching strays that like weren't even close to what he said on the podcast. Like Lowe, paraphrasing here, essentially
Yeah, what
said,
did Zach say?
He essentially said, Bulls fans, if this trade to Detroit happens, Bulls fans should be prepared for an underwhelming return. And then some of the trades on Twitter were like Ivy and Asar and stuff like that. And it was like, hold up. Like we're putting words in Zach's mouth. Like they would aggregate them saying Detroit was the player and then they would throw in their own trade. They may not have been doing it on purpose, but it was like, oh, hold up. Zach specifically said underwhelming return is what should be anticipated. And then the injury came out and obviously that's, completely changing that dynamic altogether. So
yeah, there's that. And there is the piece of like, so KDC brings up fans are mocking that tweet for Clutch Sports mentioning their brand. So like, here's the difference between like Shams tweeting, Clutch Sports and Zack LaVine versus a team doing it. I think it's actually valuable to know where that information is coming from. If a reporter is reporting it, like you're actually saying that, like, this is where the information in some respect is coming from, right? It's, putting a name on a source in some respect, right? That's valuable. For a team to do it, like the team is the source here. You know what I mean? Like to me, it almost seems like the team is like kind of backhanding it a little bit whenever you decide to do it that way. Maybe I'm kind of overthinking the whole thing, but who knows? Okay, so Zack LaVine is out for the season now because of this. The question here is, does this change anything for the Chicago Bulls?
I don't know what Chicago's going to do. I mean, I think now they're stuck with Zack LaVine. And so, but it goes back to is like, I'm starting to feel like, they have to trade DeMar DeRozan, right? They cannot keep him past the deadline.
So it's a great question, right? So right now they are what? They're in 8th place.
I had them in 9th, but some games have happened today.
Yeah, no, you're right. They're in 9th. You're right. They're 3 games back of Orlando. So they're in 9th.
Yeah. So Orlando won today. So now it's 3. They're a half up on the Hawks, they're only 2 up on the 11th Nets on 11th place, like 2 games from being out of the play-in even.
The Chicago Bulls organization has been very consistent in terms of wanting to stay competitive. Them making a play-in would, I guess, be competitive. I think that it makes no sense for them to continue with this roster moving forward. I think it's completely batshit for them to keep Caruso and DeMar DeRozan and everything. But I'm not the one that owns the team, and I'm not the one running the organization. So, and by the way, like they've played better without Zack LaVine this year. Like they're a minus 5.8 per 100 when Zach's on the court, and they're like very slightly positive when Zach has been off the court. So when I say all of this, in terms of them, yeah, obviously they should move DeRozan. Obviously they should move Caruso. It's just not the reality that organization has tended to operate within over the course of the last 2 or 3 years, or even going back further and further, right? So it's hard for me to say that they should move these guys. They will move these guys when it just seems like that's not what they're operating under. Like they could very easily. Shams reported earlier this season they were looking at an extension for DeMar DeRozan. I don't know if those talks still exist, if they're still looking, but like they could very easily decide to bring DeMar back. And DeMar is, by all accounts, an unbelievable human being that probably would not mind being, the old head for a team that is up and coming, for Kobe White, for Julian Phillips, for Dalen Terry, and like all these kids on the team. Again, like to me, you move these guys unequivocally. I just don't know if LaVine being out changes anything for them, because they've been better without these guys, or without Zach, as it was, because they've put the ball in Kobe White's hands. Pat Williams has played better without LaVine in the lineup. I think it gives him just a little bit more freedom and autonomy, it feels like.
Sumu's been playing better recently, right? A little bit.
Yeah, he's been better. So like, yes, the obvious answer here is the obvious answer, that they should do these things. I just don't know if they will.
I mean, I think if you ask me to predict what happened, I think they end up moving Caruso, because my gut tells me they get an offer that's like, you're crazy not to take this. We've talked about this at length.
Bryce, I can tell you they've gotten those offers.
They have to do it then. Like,
I can tell you, like, they've gotten those offers and it hasn't happened. So
this is the second time I've snapped at you. The first time was before we started recording, and then now this time. So that was my gut, is like eventually they get a deal but I could see them, like you say, with DeRozan, at his age, maybe he, them paying him more than him and his representation thinks he can get anywhere else at age 34. They talk themselves into, hey, Kobe, and rightfully so, Kobe White has been awesome. Vooch, we're going to run it back with Pat Will. They have a pick this year, and just running it back. Like, you're going to keep LaVine anyway at this point. So I guess you go into the offseason and figure that out whenever he gets healthy or whatever. Maybe you start the season with him and go from there. He has less years on his contract at next year's deadline. Mm-hmm. So maybe in some way that becomes not valuable, but less not valuable, however you would say that. And so my gut tells me we're getting a Caruso trade if they get blown away, or nothing. Like, that's kind of where I'm at with the Bulls. And just to clarify, we only went through where they were at in the standings just to give context. We weren't saying that without LaVine, they're going to fall way off or something like that. We were just giving context of where they were in the standings right now.
It's just important to note, like, where they are in the standings. This is a play-in team right now. The East race for the play-in picture in 9 and 10 is a total catastrophe right now, where the team in 11th has a record of 20 and 28. The team in 12th is 17 and 31. So this is essentially now an 11 or a 3-team race for 2 spots, where it's going to be Chicago, Atlanta, and Brooklyn. And all 3 of those teams are, probably playing a game of chicken in some respect on who's going to sell, in order to figure out if those play-in spots are available. Because like Brooklyn could easily move some of their vets. We're going to talk about them in a minute.
Yeah.
Chicago has the option to move some of their vets. And then Atlanta's been trying to move guys seemingly for a while. And, the guy that's most likely to move at this deadline seemingly is DeJounte Murray. So I don't know, man. Like, I don't think LaVine's injury changes anything for them, I guess, is where I'm at. I just don't know specifically what Chicago and Brooklyn are doing. I don't know what their goals are as an organization. Are you trying to win, or are you trying to like not lose? It's kind of what it comes down to. It feels like right now, those 2 organizations are trying to not lose as opposed to win games, because if you are the Brooklyn Nets, for instance, you have nothing resembling a core that can get you to 50 wins right now. You'd have to go make a trade. Maybe you go trade for Donovan Mitchell or something in the offseason. If the Cavs flame out in the playoffs, who knows, right? That remains to be seen if that happens. But let's say that that's a possibility. You trade for Donovan Mitchell, you bring him home to New York, everything like that. Great. Does a Donovan Mitchell Brooklyn Nets team win 50 games? I kind of think no. Donovan Mitchell, Mikal Bridges, you re-sign Nick Claxton. Maybe you end up not getting an offer for Dorian Finney-Smith and Cam Johnson. That team, I don't think, wins 50.
Yeah, probably not.
So Donovan Mitchell's great. Like, I think the world of Donovan
He's been
Mitchell
awesome this year too. He's a guy I don't know that we've talked enough about, or maybe you have when I haven't been on, but
yeah.
When I've watched the Cavs recently, I'm like, man, next time we get a chance, I need to give Donovan Mitchell some love.
Yeah, like Donovan Mitchell is a top 10 MVP guy, no questions asked, and should be at least second team All NBA. He's been staggeringly good this season.
Yeah, he's been awesome.
But like, we'll see what happens with that Cavs team. Like, they have real decisions to make in the offseason if things go poorly, or even if they go well, they're going to have to make decisions. So if you're Brooklyn, you have these picks out to Houston. And to me, it almost feels like they're worried that if they lose these games, like if they fall off a cliff, those picks are going to be like top 5 picks, and it's going to look catastrophic for the front office, and then they get fired or something like that, right? And that's what I mean when I say, like, it feels like they're making choices not to lose as opposed to winning. Because to me, the obvious choices here are, okay, we don't know if we're going to retain Nick Claxton. Let's move Nick. We don't know if we're going to retain or we have an offer for multiple first-round picks for Mikal Bridges. We'll talk about that momentarily. What are we doing? Let's do it, right? So that's what I'm struggling with these two teams in particular. It feels like they're playing not to lose, and that's never the spot you want to be in as an organization. And in Chicago's case, where they have all of the assets that you can possibly want as an organization, great market, historic. Like, seriously, you talk to kids here in Australia, you talk to anybody over 20 here in Australia, the Bulls like matter internationally. The brand matters. Michael Jordan matters. They're always going to have that inherent advantage, and they don't play it up. And that's probably ownership. We've gone through multiple cycles of front offices at this point that tells me it's ownership more than anything else. But this front office particularly, it feels like they need to, make the tough choices and be willing to move on from good veterans that probably will not be on your next winning team.
So it's easy for me to say where I sit right now, but I feel like I get what you're saying, and I agree with it. And to me, it's like your goal should always be building out a championship team. Now, that may not be building a championship team for this year or next year, but it's like on the path to that, right? Like maybe it's this move that then leads to this move, and we make this step into the next step. And with the Bulls specifically, and I'm still trying to get a feel for the Nets, it's like the Bulls are just saying, hey, we're not on that path. We're just going to make the moves so we're good or average or mediocre. Yeah. We're in the playoffs. We're going to win some games. We're not going to be embarrassing. Like, everybody can make fun of the Pistons, and rightfully so. They at least thought they were tearing this thing down to then build it out to be a really, really build it out, right? Like it's been all screwed up. Like they've messed it up, and they haven't done a good job, and there's been errors and all of that, but it at least seemed like the plan was to break it down. And I'm not saying teams have to break it down as far as they did. I'm not saying the Bulls should fire sell the whole team. We're not sitting here saying trade Kobe Wright, trade Patrick Williams, trade DeSumo. Like, we're not saying trade all of them, but it just seems like this roster,
the guys that you can get stuff for,
yes,
and that have minimal team control moving forward.
Yes, and then that sets you up to, hopefully, if you make the right trade and guys progress and you make the right pick in the draft and those things, you can start to build out a plan to go somewhere further than what we've seen from this team. And it just doesn't seem like, for whatever reason, philosophy, whatever, that they're willing to do that. It's like, hey, we're ninth in the East. We're going to have at least one play-in game. Maybe we win two and we play a 4-game series, which means we get 2 home games in the playoffs. I just don't personally agree with that. You know what I mean? So that's where I struggle with the Bulls.
Yeah, no, I don't agree with it either. This is a team that has all the advantages that an organization could ask for. They should not be playing for the 9 seed. There is not a season in existence where the Chicago Bulls should be playing for the 9 seed. Think about that. That's insane to me that is a statement. If they don't make trades at the deadline, that's essentially what they're telling you.
Yep.
We're playing for the 9 seed.
Yep.
And that just seems nonsensical to me. It seems completely nonsensical to ever do that as an organization point blank, but especially if you're that team. That feels completely crazy to me.
Like, I give the Nets a little bit of a pass because we're like, we haven't seen
they're in between a rock and a hard place. They don't,
and it hasn't been as many years. Like, we've seen the Bulls play this game from, I understand for a little while, if I get attached to players as a fan and other stuff I do and all that. Like, as a Chiefs fan, I get attached to players, right? And I'm sure if I worked in a front office, and you have to do a good job of putting this stuff to the side, but you get attached to your process, your players, the guys you picked, all of those things. And so I understand, Sam, when a front office or whatever holds onto a player in a dream for a couple years too long, 1 year too long, like you thought this was going to be it and it didn't work. That's not the case here. We've seen this play out year after year and not work. Like, eventually you have to cut bait and try a different path. It's frustrating to see them not try something different, whether it ends up working or not.
So Lonzo Ball played his last game on January 14th, 2022. From that point forward, I'm going to do some math on what the Bulls are, what their record is. Keep talking while I do this math.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up Ball, because obviously that's been a part of this equation. You know, when you look at the cap sheet, you see that their 2 of their 3 biggest cap hits are Zack LaVine, whose injury history has been discussed a lot, and then unfortunately Lonzo Ball, who's just not just, but is behind DeRozan and just above Vooch on the cap hits as well. And so, like, there's a little bit of, man, this stinks for them that 2 of the better players that were supposed to be a part of this haven't been healthy. But yet again, as you just alluded to, this has been 2 full years now for Lonzo Ball. Zack LaVine, you know, we know what the risk that comes with that. And again, we continue to do the same things. So I
believe I've got them at 83 and 95 post Lonzo injury. And oh, by the way, for as much as like Zack LaVine got hurt this season, and like that's a real factor, they were like the healthiest team in the NBA last season. Like, everybody played like 75 plus games for them last year. They were incredibly healthy. And like, DeMar and Kobe have only missed 2 games total between the 2 of them. Vucevic has only missed 5 games. Pat Williams has only missed 7 games. Caruso's only missed 7 games. Like, outside of the LaVine deal this year, they've been healthy in that time. Like, you can't really fall back on,
sure,
we got hurt, like things happened outside of the Lonzo thing. Like, they've been healthy, and you can't really count on Lonzo coming back at this point. Right. As much as we'd all love it, and it would be an amazing story, there's just no circumstance where you can fall back on that. And they're 83 and 95 in that time. It's time to blow this thing up. You move Caruso, you could get legitimate, genuine value. You move DeMar, you could get pretty real, I think, value. I think they get a first rounder for DeMar for sure. You would get more for Caruso. I feel quite confident of that. You could end up with 3 first round picks moving forward between those 2 if you move them, I think.
Yeah, that's good perspective with LaVine, because I think because of his injury history, we automatically go to like every year, but last year that wasn't the case, right? He played 77 last year. So they had a full year of seeing this, like you said, and you can't count on Lonzo, as sad as it is. It's they've seen it enough. Like, we know. Again, I'll give you a pass whenever you want to hold on to an idea and a path that you put together. At some point, you can't keep doubling down on it, tripling down on it. You have to be able to say, it's time to cut bait. It didn't work. It didn't work. Maybe Lonzo was the linchpin that held it all together, and we'd be talking about this completely different. Sorry, that sucks, but he's not here now. And you haven't been able to replace that. So now it's time to try at least a slightly different plan with new players in the organization.
That's right. Okay. We'll see what Chicago does. Maybe they surprise us this week and don't do nothing, or like do very little. Again, like, I don't know if the LaVine thing changes their calculus at all. If I was them, I'd be selling, but I just don't know if they will at this point.
Quick over under 1.5 players, significant players, like,
Does Drummond count in that?
Sure. Over under 1.5 players traded away from the Chicago Bulls.
I think that they maybe do move Andre, because like that's just an obvious one to me. And like that's not like core shaking or anything. I think I would go under. Just based on the reporting. Not based on anything I know. Absolutely not based on anything I know. Based on the reporting, what it seems like they're doing. Maybe they're just like driving up the value by saying that they're going to keep these guys. You never know, right? But it seems like under, based on right now.
All right.
Okay, let's go to the Nets. The Nets, like, I just don't know what is going on because for the last like week, it's felt like there have been this like cascade of leaks regarding the Nets in terms of what they've turned down for players, right? So from Matt Moore at The Athletic, well, really it started on, I guess it was Thursday, when Sam Amick, Kelly Iko, Shams Charania did their big takeout on the Nets, or on the Rockets, I'm sorry. And within that, they mentioned that the Rockets offered like some combination of Jalen Green and like the Nets picks back to the Nets that they own for Mikal Bridges. I don't know the veracity of that. I know that the Rockets really value those Nets picks, like at a really high level. It'd be interesting to me if they offered that. It's even more interesting to me that the Nets would turn that down. Like if the Nets turned down 2 of those 3 picks in Jalen Green, like say that was the offer, something along those lines, totally speculative. I'm not saying that that's what happened. That feels pretty wild to me, because that allows you to actually rebuild in the way that you need to as an organization, but I digress. Then from Matt Moore over at the Action Network, 2 league sources said the Nets have claimed multiple offers of 5 first-rounders for Mikal Bridges. He goes on to say, I'm pretty skeptical on that front. Could be 5 firsts in terms of like swaps, heavily protected picks. And if that was the case, why would you share that and then continue to say that they're not moving Mikal Bridges, which I think that's a good point from Matt. Continual rumors saying the Rockets are interested in Bridges. Look, I've heard of teams that have offered like real pick capital for Bridges. That's absolutely a thing. 5 is not an offer I've heard before. That feels very aggressive. And if you turn down 5 first rounders for Mikal Bridges, God love Mikal Bridges. I was and I continue to be like the biggest proponent of Mikal Bridges as a basketball player. I think he's outstanding. I think it's absolutely everything that you want from a 3rd or 4th guy on your team. If you got offered 5 first-round picks for that guy and you turned it down, like you were out of your mind, I think. Completely out of your mind.
Well,
because
don't you think
that's like star level capital.
Okay,
And
yeah.
I think there's a good case that, like, in terms of impacting winning, Mikal Bridges is like a top 50, 40-ish guy in the league if you put him in the right role. But real tough to get to 5 first-round picks, I think, for Mikal.
And we know not all first round picks are created equal and pick swaps. And was it even true or not? Again, if they were truly offered 5 first round picks for Mikal Bridges, you can easily just say, we'll take it because we're winning this trade. And even if you hate that you're losing Mikal Bridges, you can just take those 5 first round picks. And like you said, go get an actual number 1 or number 2 option, because I kind of land with you. I love Mikal Bridges, but I don't think that that's what he is on a team. And so he's like, here, a team just gift wrapped. I mean, you essentially you could feel like we just traded Mikal Bridges for whoever that is, right? Whoever you can get, whatever star, top 15, top 20 player, for 5 first round picks and matching salary. So I don't want to say I don't believe it, because I'm not in this game enough to know how it all works. And I would never call somebody out, because I wouldn't want that job to be sourcing and reporting and all of that. But it's like, I can't believe either side of it, that somebody would give it up, and that if they did, the Nets would turn it down.
So here would be the case for keeping Mikal for them. If you are genuinely going out and star hunting, you need to have a team around them to make your situation competitive, viable for that star to want to go there. Mikal, I think, is probably one of the best number 3 or number 4 options in the league. His defense this year has been not as good as what it's been in the past, because he's taking on more offensive load. He is an elite defender. Like, he has showcased that in Phoenix when he was asked to do that. A genuine all defense guy who can knock down shots, who can play with the ball in his hand a little bit. It's everything you want from like a third guy on your team. Let's say that like him, OG Anunoby, somebody like that, they're like the best possible like third guys that you can have on a team right now, basically in the league. So that would be the case for keeping him. The problem is that the Nets don't have a number 1 or a number 2. And they really only have the pick capital, in my opinion, to go get a legitimate number 1. So, and they don't really have anything interesting in terms of younger players. God love Cam Thomas. I don't know how many teams are interested in Cam Thomas at this stage, just because of his style of play. So I say all this to say, I think that it's going to be really difficult for them to do this. And the easiest way for them to get it back is by getting their picks, if Houston is willing to do that. Now, again, from what I know, Houston really thinks those Nets picks might be valuable. And I've kind of talked before about, if you're Houston, if the Nets are offering you Mikal Bridges for some of those picks, the odds are they might be offering Mikal Bridges to other teams for some picks. Now, Houston's situation is by far the most valuable thing plausible, because it's their own picks, which allows them to tank, which allows them to try and like get in the mix for some superstar younger players or some, draft picks, everything like that. I kind of would bet on, if they're trying to offer me Mikal for some reason, that, or like if they're willing to move me Mikal, they're probably willing to move him elsewhere. And if that happens, these picks go through the roof in terms of value. So it's a game of chicken in that way, right? If you're Houston. And by the way, Brooklyn's apparently not shopping Mikal Bridges based off of all of this. But again, to Matt's point in that article, if the offer really was 5 firsts, why share that and then continue to say that they're not interested in trading Mikal Bridges?
Yeah.
Like, that doesn't line up. Like that's why I wanted to talk about this. The leaks that are coming out of Brooklyn, or like that are being shared in some way. Who knows if they're coming out of Brooklyn, not coming out of Brooklyn, wherever they're coming from, or like if they're just bullshitting with people around the league and then people around the league are leaking. You never know where these things come from. But if you're not interested in moving him, why would you let it be known that you have all of this crazy value on the table for him?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that they're moving him. I'm just saying that I find the whole process very weird.
Yeah. No, and that's why it's gotten so crazy at this point. Cause you just said it. Is it leaking? Are they doing it purposely? Like, are they, wanting to get this out because they think it's giving them the competitive advantage? Is it coming from the other sides? And that's the part that it's hard. Are they trying to refute it once they know that it's going to come out? I guess in a vacuum, would you keep Mikal if you're Brooklyn? Like I just found
No.
myself going through the roster and going, which of these guys would I be looking to trade at a quote unquote fair value? Like not a Godfather offer value, but just like at a fair value, who would I be looking to trade and who would I be looking to keep? Because if you're not looking to keep Mikal, you're probably not worried about keeping anybody, right? Like that's
Yeah, no. Yeah.
so
If you're Houston, like if Houston really did offer, like, let's even just say a couple of their picks and like one of their young guys. I'm not going to put names on it because I don't know, and that's where we get into trouble. But if they're willing to offer a couple of those Nets picks back, that makes life so much easier for Brooklyn.
So you feel like Brooklyn should just go ahead and take the complete tear it down, especially if they can get their picks back, right? Like that's a little bit of the caveat here. What if they can't get their picks? What if you can trade Mikal to another team for 2 first-round picks?
No. The
Okay.
price would be more if it's another team. Honestly, I think they'd get 3 or 4, given how cheap his contract is for the next 2 years, given his value on a winning team. I think they would get way more than that, which is why I would probably wait to move him until I got something like that. But it seems, I mean, look, they're claiming, according to Matt, multiple offers of 5 first-round picks. Let's even say it's 4. I'm probably doing that and just betting on a couple of those teams to be bad.
Yeah.
Here's the other thing. It's not just Mikal where these leaks are coming from.
Yeah.
Because Brian Lewis from the New York Post said, a source told the Post the Nets rejected an offer of 2 first-rounders for Dorian Finney-Smith, who is reportedly coveted by not just the Lakers, but also by the Mavericks, Bucks, Thunder, Suns, and Kings. So, I don't buy that at all. I truly don't buy that I don't think they have 2 first-round picks on the market for Dorian Finney-Smith, and I don't think they would have rejected that. That seems completely bonkers to me. Yeah. I'm sure that Brian got told that. I don't mean to denigrate the reporting. That just feels to me like something that is so crazy that I can't really buy it. Like Dorian Finney-Smith is averaging like 9 points a game. He's a great defensive player, but he's also like 31 years old. There's a lot of downside there to be offering 2 first-round picks for somebody like that.
And he's not an expiring contract at all. He's on the books for 15 next year and has a player option for over 15 the year after that.
Yeah. If they get a first-round pick for Dorian Finney-Smith, I would buy that entirely. That would make sense to me. 2 is pretty crazy and very rich. Now, I don't understand where the Nets are going is my problem. Why can nobody in the media figure out what they're trying to do when all of these leaks are coming out? Because it's clear that things are, coming out of there in some respect, one way or another, whether it's coming from there directly, whether it's coming from conversations getting leaked that have happened, with Sean Marks, with another organization, and they're coming out from the other organization, whatever, right? To me, I would say that the problem is that they don't really seem to have like a great course of action. And I wonder if they're really struggling to come up with a plan on what to do.
Maybe they just have the perfect plan, Sam, and they're just playing all of us, and they're going to get 5 first-round picks for Mikal Bridges, and they're going to get 2 for Dorian Finney-Smith, and and they're just going to come out. No, I don't know, and we've talked about it too. Like what is the right path for this team? Because, you look and there's some interesting pieces on the roster. You still have the Ben Simmons contract and everything going there, and he is playing again now. And you have
Which
no
is
number
great.
one. Yeah, it's awesome. It's amazing. You have no number one. You have no, and like just kind of, I don't want to say weird pieces in a bad way, just unique. Like you brought up Cam Thomas. What is Cam Thomas? He seems like a player. I like him because I like dudes that can get buckets, and he can get buckets with the best of them. He kind of makes sense for them because they don't have a number one or a number two. So he can come in and just get buckets. What is his value around the rest of the league? Are there other teams that would value a guy that does what he does? Mikal Bridges, it's interesting because, like you said, he's a really good third option or an amazing fourth option on a good contract, and the defense will be better in another place. Dorian Finney-Smith, Claxton, I think, is a really good defender, really interesting player. So you just go through the roster, and there's like,
but you might not have Claxton next year.
Yeah, no, and
he's an unrestricted free agent.
So yeah, that's the other thing. You have these guys, Dinwiddie, not as crazy. Royce O'Neal's unrestricted free agent. Dennis Smith Jr., Lonnie Walker, who play minutes for this team. I think Day'Ron Sharpe has been good in the minutes he's got. Like he's been crazy active on the boards and just plays his butt off. Like there's a lot. I struggle with these teams. There's names I like, and there's players that do things that really make sense and are really valuable, but you can tell it's not all going to work together there. So then which ones do you value to keep with you? How much do you value trading them to other teams? How much do other teams value them? And then ultimately, Sam, the heart of all this is, how do we go get a number one? That's ultimately what the question is. If we're going to really build this out to be contenders and compete, or at least a number two to start there and then start the process, how do we do that? Where does that come from?
Yeah, I agree. I don't know where that comes from yet. I mean, maybe, again, the name that makes sense is Donovan Mitchell, right? From New York. There have been rumors about the Knicks for years. They have a crazy number of picks. Who knows? I saw a report, I think maybe from Jake Fisher, that said like the Nets aren't that interested in DeJounte Murray. I've kind of wondered, like, could you try and like piece together a DeJounte, Donovan Mitchell, Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, Nick Claxton core, and maybe you can win some games like that. That to me though seems like their best case scenario.
Yeah.
And I don't think that team wins a title. I don't think that team wins a whole hell of a lot beyond, like, I think they win like 45 to 50 games, but like, I don't think they win a playoff series probably, right?
So
maybe they win a playoff series.
Yeah, I mean, I think that team's interesting depending on, like, we go back to the same conversation with DeJounte Murray, but theoretically that team defends really, really well with DeJounte, assuming you get San Antonio defense, DeJounte, Mikal in option number 3, offensive, defensive, Mikal, Claxton, Donovan Mitchell can just go crazy on offense, which we know he can do. He is second in the NBA in steals right now as well, to be fair to Donovan Mitchell.
For what it's worth, I think Donovan's been pretty good on defense this year. Like he's fought and he's scratched and clawed, and he's small, but like he's long and he's been pretty effective.
And you got a lot of length around him there, Sam, with that roster. Like, I mean, DeJounte, Cam, Mikal, Claxton, that's a lot of length around him to protect any of those limitations. I think what I find myself thinking too is, I want Mikal on this roster whenever I go get that number one.
That's the case I made. Yeah.
That's where I start to struggle with move on from Mikal is, I'm not excited. Like, I'm not saying a Mikal and Donovan Mitchell combo wins a ton of games, but it's a decent starting point as opposed to just Donovan Mitchell without Mikal and a bunch of draft picks. Now, some of those draft picks would be used to get Donovan, but if you traded Mikal, you'd have more. You'd have avenues.
So here's the thing. Here's where this all comes together from a team building perspective. If you want Mikal to be your number 3, because that's ultimately what I think the goal is, right? You need to go get both of those guys within the next 2 years, because that's when Mikal's deal expires.
Yep.
Maybe he'd be willing to resign, but if he resigns at 32, 33, 34 million, it then becomes very difficult to go get another star because you've reduced your flexibility and you've reduced some issues. That's why I thought that, like, okay, maybe they should be interested in a DeJounte Murray deal. Could you do 2 first-round picks for DeJounte and then keep enough asset capital long-term in order to go out and make a move for Donovan Mitchell? Maybe you can't. Like, maybe the DeJounte Murray price tag for them is so high that they then would not retain the asset capital that they need to actually go out and get a number 1 option.
Yep.
And if that's the case, like, I totally get that. That's fair, and I wouldn't do that either. But if you could do something like that, that is intriguing. And I wonder if you could find a way to do so with like 1 first-round pick and then like maybe moving a Dorian Finney-Smith for a 2nd first-round pick and then rerouting that first-round pick to Atlanta and, some sort of like pick swap somewhere, who the hell knows. But like that offer, like 2 first-round picks, something, one of their younger guys.
That's better than what the Lakers are offering right now, right?
Probably exceeds the Lakers offer. So I'm intrigued by them trying to go out and get DeJounte. But again, reporting is that they're not all that interested in DeJounte. Maybe I saw like a Nets Daily thing that said like they weren't interested in DeJounte. I can't remember if it was Jake or Nets Daily. But like if they're not interested in that, that's going to be hard, I think.
And I've said this multiple times now. I just think, I don't know what I think about going and get DeJounte for the Nets, but I do think for DeJounte, I would like to see it because it just allows him to play. We could see how good he could be playing with the ball in his hands as, a high level option in that offense. I want to ask you about the Rockets side of this before we move on. I know we have a super chat as well. I know we've kind of answered.
We do. I've been kind of waiting to hold off.
Oh, okay. All right.
Let's just do that now.
I just wanted to make sure you saw it.
Yeah, shout out D-Rock. The Nets can't blow it up till we beat Kyrie. Thanks for the super chat, D-Rock. I think that they probably will beat Kyrie at some point, but it's going to be a little bit rough.
Yeah, and like I said,
D-Rock, thanks for the super chat.
D-Rock is the best, man. He's always giving us questions in the super chat, and obviously, if any of you guys want to throw one in there, we'd appreciate it as well. That's kind of what we talked about, right? When is the time to blow it up? How much do you blow it up? Where do you value Bridges in terms of being part of that or being something that you move to get first-round picks to?
It's all timing.
Yes,
it's all timing for them. Like, can they find your 2 stars in the next 2 years before Bridges either becomes expensive or decides to leave?
And you just outlined something where can you also feel the confidence to exit and string those moves together, right? Because it's probably not going to happen simultaneously. It may happen like at the deadline and then the offseason, or the offseason and then deadline. But you have to be confident that you can make those moves all happen one after another, because like you said, you only have a short window to do it before Bridges isn't on this just amazing contract. I want to ask you real quick, and we can stay on the Nets or we can move on after this. Whatever.
No, we can do the Rockets. It's fine.
Okay. I just want to know, would you do that deal if you were the Rockets? Like, we've talked multiple times now about these 2 first-round picks and said player for Mikal Bridges. Would you do that if you were Houston? We haven't really talked about that side of it.
No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't. It would depend on the price. If I was moving 1 in Jalen Green for, like, even if I was moving like the 2025 or 2026 one, like one of the like really valuable draft years, I would do that for Bridges with Jalen Green. If we're talking 2 of them, period, I would not do them, because like, think about that in terms of prospects, right? Let's say that Brooklyn ends up with a top 6 or 7 pick this year. Where are they at right now? They're probably right around that range, I would bet. Right?
Yeah.
Like something like 7. They're 8 right now. So let's say they're 8 right now, and I don't know how good this team's going to be next year. Like, I think there's probably like something like 8th next year as well. If you're putting names on it, you're doing something like, I don't know, right now I have like Ron Holland, Jacoby Walter, Rob Dillingham in that range.
Yep.
So you're doing one of those 2 Jacoby Walter, Rob Dillingham, Ron Holland, whoever, right? And then in 2025, it'd be something like Hugo Gonzalez. I'm trying to think of like names that could be in that range next year. Jaleel Bethea is a guy that I like. Dylan Harper, could be like a 5th overall pick, something like that.
Or some freshman that returns to school and has a really good sophomore year.
But you're talking about doing Mikal Bridges for 2 of those guys. And the other piece of it for Houston is the way these Nets picks around the league are seen. They are seen as among the most valuable assets, draft capital wise, that you can have league wide. So can you do better than trading for Mikal Bridges? Like if you attach 2 of these picks to Cam Whitmore and like expiring salary or something, can you go get a genuine star and not a guy that can be like a number 3 on a really great team? If I'm Houston, I'm waiting. If it's 2 of those things, if it's 1 of those picks, sure, I would do it, but I would wait if it was 2 personally.
No, I like that. And, it cut me a little bit, and I know you're just using Cam Whitmore's name, but yeah, that makes more sense. Like go get a real dude. And maybe Cam ends up being a real dude, right? Like maybe that's the star. No, I guess my immediate thought was, they have so much young talent. We talked about this last episode, Sam, about how much young talent they have. And so sometimes I just wonder, okay, yeah, you have a top 8 pick. Where are the minutes going to come for Rob Dillingham or Ron Holland or whoever? And I know you always want this influx of talent. I get it. Like you want to be able to add to it as guys get expensive and all of that. Are the minutes there? Is the opportunity there? Or are you better off bringing in a really good Mikal Bridges? But I like the asset management in terms of it might actually be better to get somebody bigger and a higher option than Mikal Bridges with those picks. That makes sense to me.
Yeah. Shout out D-Rock. He says they play Kyrie on Tuesday. The Brooklyn Nets trades Wednesday and Thursday. Let's hope they can beat Kyrie.
There you go, D-Rock.
Shout out D-Rock for the super chat.
I don't make predictions, but Nets over Mavs on Tuesday, D-Rock. Nets over Mavs on Tuesday for you.
That's a good way to get into what we're going to talk about. We're going to do trade deadline predictions here. I want 2 trade deadline predictions from you, and then I'll give one to start that'll get you going.
Okay.
My first trade deadline prediction is that Killian Hayes has a new home by Friday.
That's not fair. That's not fair. I'm not reacting to that one. You're trolling. This is definition. Young kids, this is the definition of trolling.
A little bit. But I think Killian, it seems like the ship has sailed a little bit for Killian Hayes in Detroit. And it should have. And here's the thing. Omari Sankofa, your guy,
my co-host,
reported that this was like a real potential thing, that they're gonna move, or like that Killian Hayes would like a new home.
I think
how was it worded?
I think his representation would like for him to be on a new team post trade deadline, I think was essentially the paraphrasing.
Sure. So the tweet is, now Hayes camp would prefer a 22-year-old point guard land with a new team. The Pistons seem to agree. There is no team in the goddamn league that would have given Killian Hayes as much leash and as much like wherewithal to be able to try and succeed as the Detroit Pistons did. This ain't Detroit's fault. Like, I just want to be clear about that. This ain't Detroit's fault.
We've talked about this, and this is a good example. The context here is this was Troy Weaver's very first draft pick. Killian Hayes was Troy Weaver's very first draft pick as GM of the Detroit Pistons. He also selected Sadiq Bey and Isaiah Stewart in that draft. And then, we know you have to imagine when you have the number 7 pick, you're the GM of the Detroit Pistons, you're starting the rebuild, and you take Killian Hayes, you don't want that to be wrong. And so I feel like they've done, and there's been some injuries in this first couple of years. You could excuse things away for Killian Hayes for a couple of years. And the team hasn't been good. So it hasn't really crushed them. This year was the final straw when he's playing over Jaden Ivey. Like that's where it actually started to get frustrating for me because I think Jaden Ivey is awesome. And so that's where it got frustrating for me. I've been saying this, like, it just seems like if Killian Hayes is an NBA player, he's going to figure it out somewhere else. The time in Detroit had run its course. Maybe with Monty, he was going to figure it out and, like he would, tap into something with him. Monty was all in on him. It sure seemed like from the outside, and it still didn't work. So Killian got his shot in Detroit. And now I don't know if he'll get a shot somewhere else or not. I don't know what a trade. I don't think that makes any sense. Like, I don't think anybody's trading for him. Maybe it's like one of those top 55 protected second round picks or something, whatever. I hope he catches on and he's very good. Like, I think he could be like a fifth guard in the NBA somewhere. He's a quality defender, not great quality. And at times he finds his mid-range jumper. Maybe a change of scenery really works for him. I don't know.
Yeah, look, like these guys that struggle to score, that are defense first, they sometimes take some time. Chris Dunn, I think, is like a great model for Killian Hayes to grow off of. The thing with Chris versus Killian is like Chris is fucking tenacious, man.
Yep.
Whereas Killian plays hard. Like I don't mean to do that, but like there's a bit of a difference, I think, between the two.
Agreed.
My second trade deadline prediction is actually something GL Lobo put in a super chat. So shout out GL Lobo.
Appreciate it.
He said Kyle Kuzma to the Kings. And I think that is actually what I'm gonna predict. Kyle Kuzma, I think you can line up a lot of things that makes sense for Kuzma to go to the Kings and be like a offensive weapon that can be like a secondary shot creator for them next to Keegan Murray. And obviously with De'Aaron and Domantas doing things on the end, he can be a shooter. He's a very comfortable, confident shooter. I would be really interested to see what his shot percentage from three looks like when he's getting as many open threes as what I think he projects to get in Sacramento, or would project to get in Sacramento. And honestly, like, it's just kind of a better fit than Kevin Huerter. Like, I wonder if you could do something like Kevin Huerter, like maybe Davion Mitchell, or
I was gonna say
something like that. Maybe,
it seems
maybe Chris
like
Duarte.
It seems like Davion's money. I mean, really, whether it's Barnes or Huerter, it's essentially Davion or Duarte, and you're at the money. So that's what I was curious. Like, what's the deal though? Like, Washington isn't trading Kuzma just for either combination of those guys. So then you're adding in. Let me go back here because I know that pick to Atlanta has protections on it. So you're having Washington's looking at a pick in 2028. So like 2028 first plus Huerter and Davion.
2028. Say that again.
I think it has to be 2028, if I'm not mistaken here, because of the protections on the pick owed to Atlanta. And then, I mean, make your combination of players, like whichever one it is, like Barnes and Mitchell, Huerter.
You can just say like first available, like first rounder, and it would be like,
sure. Yeah. Okay.
2026. And it would be a 2026 pick in reality if Sacramento did that.
Oh, yeah, because that's going to convey this year.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. My bad. Yeah. I'm overthinking this then. So, okay. Yeah. They could get an earlier pick. So 1 first round pick and the salary.
Yeah. And
you think that gets it done?
I think it's pretty close. Like, could you do something like this? I mean, this gets you like fairly close, I think. Where it's Kyle Kuzma for Kevin Huerter, Davion Mitchell in a first. Honestly, I don't know if I would do this if I was Sacramento. I do think Huerter is a better fit, but like, I don't know if I do think that Kuzma is a better fit than Huerter, but I don't know that like he's so much better than Huerter. to where like it totally lines up. This also, I think, ticks a box of like getting more than a first rounder, more like 2 first rounders for Kuzma, because I think that down the road you'd be able to flip Herder for a first round pick. Maybe not immediately, but something like that. There's just a lot that can line up here where you can do something along these lines. And if like you could keep Herder, let's say, and you could do Barnes instead.
I like
So it's
this a
like,
lot better for the Kings.
well, I do too, but I don't think that they would take the Barnes deal for Kuzma with like just a first round pick, knowing that Mitchell like just hasn't shown enough offensively. Like it'd have to be the Kings adding
More pick.
something else, like a Colby Jones and like a second or something like that to me.
Yeah.
Like I would need, I'd need more, I think, than just Barnes and Mitchell in a first if I was
I will also say our
doing
guy
these.
David Aldridge, I was listening to that podcast recently, and again, like I kind of paraphrase here, like he kind of sounded like it was going to take a lot to get Kuzma, like that,
Correct.
and so that
It
kind
will.
of that stood out to me whenever Da made that comment.
DA is the best.
So
DA is like truly like an all-time guy, to be
pe-
clear.
peek behind the curtain, Da is like the most famous person I had ever met in person for the longest time in my life. So Da is
Yeah.
an American University alum, which is where I played college basketball. So Da would come to our games. He wrote about our team, like all of that stuff. And so every year at Summer League, we get to hang out we'll watch games for a few hours. Da is the man. I love him so much.
Truly one of the like all-time like great people within basketball.
Yeah.
Anything that you hear about him, like he's like he will never big time like anybody. He really cares about helping younger people. Like, yeah, like anything you hear about him, like it's all true. He so easily could have, came into the Athletic and been like, I'm David Aldridge, and been like that, and was never anything but accepting of anybody on that staff, including myself. So unbelievable, dude. Yeah, I don't think this gets it done.
Yep.
I don't think Kuzma for Barnes, Mitchell in a first gets it done. I think it'd have to be more like Herder, but I think there's enough synergy between these two teams to where you can see something getting done. So that's my prediction.
Yeah.
Okay, Bryce, I need 2 from you.
So my first one is I think the Hawks end up going straight fire sale. I think they
Okay.
and like I have no intel, so I'm completely just like playing the like I'm gonna make a prediction here and see. They trade Murray, Bogdanovich, Capella, Hunter. It's Trey Young, it's Jalen Johnson, and maybe not all of them go, but this is the year they trade those guys off and they go down that path. So that's my first prediction.
My read is that it's
They
not
stay.
impossible, but I don't think all of them go.
Sure.
My impression is that like it's going to be harder to get Bogdanovich than what people think.
Sure.
Like they really value Bogdan, and they really think that like he's on a good contract. They'd be more than happy to keep him. But I think the others, I think that's like a very real distinct possibility that they could do something like that.
So, I mean, they have to do something, right? Like the whole reason that Atlanta initially came into this
Oh, I mean,
conversation was the salary cap situation this summer.
and on top of it, like you look at the way they've played recently, like
Yeah.
they gave up 73 to Luca, and they gave up, what was it, like 141 to the Warriors. Like you look at their games, I mean, it's just like I know that like they won against the Warriors, but like I know that they're winning now, but like they've beaten, Toronto and all these like home games that they've won. I just, when you watch them, it just feels off, even when they're winning. You know what I mean? Like that Lakers game that they won. That was, if I remember correctly, was that without AD, right?
I'm
I
not
think it
sure.
was without AD. Um, and I think that like LeBron didn't play super well, and it was like a Reeves game, I think. Because I watched a little bit of that game. And then Phoenix, they beat Phoenix, I think had everybody, but like, honestly, that's just like kind of a good win. Um, and then like Golden State is like in a funky Golden State is like just as big of a mess as they are right now. So it's hard to know where exactly they are, I guess. I think where I'm at is they make some moves, but maybe not as aggressively as what people thought like a month ago.
Sure. Yeah. And that's like, I tried to have some fun with it. And um, I just, I just wonder if it's finally like the time, like, and maybe it ends up just being Capella and Hunter, or maybe they move on
Yeah.
from Sadiq Bey because they don't want to pay, whatever. But that one, you brought up the Warriors. Like, I wanted to have a really good one for the Warriors, and
I don't
I
have one.
couldn't, I couldn't figure it out. Like, I won't say what exactly I wrote in my notes, but I'm just not sure. So the other one I'm going to go with is the Thunder do make a move. Like, the Thunder make
Yeah.
a significant move to add to the rotation, not
What is
breaking.
significant?
Okay, so like, I'm not going to give a name, but what I think is, I don't think it disrupts the starting five. I think the starting five stays put because I think they'll want to figure out what those five can do in the playoffs, but they add some significant rotation minutes, probably veteran rotation minutes in the second unit, maybe a big man and a wing or something along those lines. So I think that is my other thing. I think they make a move that if SGA is top 3 player in the playoffs and Chet carries over to the playoffs and Jalen Williams does, and Giddey and Dort figure it out, that they still have the depth to truly make a run this year. So that's my prediction for them. They make a move that doesn't disrupt the starting lineup, but gets them real substantial depth in the second unit that can help come playoff time.
My prediction for them the whole way has been that they do something, right? That they do something and pick up a big,
Like,
particularly.
we've said Kelly Olynyk multiple times, right?
Yeah, you can see where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
I'm going to pull this up on the screen now. I think Kelly is a little bit more expensive than maybe what people think. Maybe something like Davis Bertans, Trey Mann, and a second for Kelly Olynyk. Or maybe it's Davis Bertans and like their least valuable first round pick that they own. One of the many like non-valuable first round picks that they own. Something like that. And this is saying that this trade failed. Why did this trade fail? Am I not? Oh, because Kelly doesn't make enough money. So you'd have to throw in something else from OKC. Or no, from Utah, but that'd be fine. You could throw in. I actually don't know what you would throw in from them, but you could throw in something and make it work. They have the Taylor Horton Tucker deal. Could be something like that. But yeah, something along Poku. Poku definitely makes this work. Shout out No Towel. It'd be Poku. Here. No, it wouldn't be Poku. I'm going the other way. Never mind. Something along those lines, though, is my idea. The Bertans deal, pick capital, etc. Basically, for Kelly.
And I know people say like they have Kendrick Williams and they have the other Jalen Williams and they have Cason Wallace and Aaron Wiggins and Isaiah. Like, I get it. Like, I realize they have dudes that we all like. These are also a bunch of dudes that haven't played in the playoffs, along with, is what's playoff Dort going to do? What is playoff Giddey going to do? So my thing is, can you find someone like a Kelly Olynyk? I've even said Gordon Hayward, that you can get in there and you feel like you can definitely trust if any of those guys, one of a couple, are able to or are not able to perform in the playoffs, especially as you get deep into the playoffs. Because to me, like, as much as I was like, man, I'm not sure if they're top, you don't want to waste a year of potentially going and competing for a championship, and they're obviously good enough to do that. So I would just hate for them to get there and all of a sudden, man, Dort isn't ready, or Giddey just doesn't get guarded and can't make a shot, but we have Isaiah Joe, but then now who takes those other minutes type of thing.
Yep.
Like, I just wanted, if I was them, I would want to make sure, even if it's just a safety net, I would want to make sure I have it, because counting on every single one of these guys to be playoff ready this year, I think would be a miscalculation. Maybe I'm proven completely wrong, but if I'm talking about making a true run in the Western Conference to the finals, I would want at least one more piece, maybe two, that I really feel strongly can compete in that situation.
I agree with you. Okay, couple of questions to finish up on. We're going to be done here in the next 7 or so minutes. From Darren Flowers, if you're the Spurs GM, who would you pick in the 2024 NBA draft? Shout out to Darren for the super chat, by the way. Thank you very
Appreciate
much.
Yep.
It's a good question. I think they are personally in the space where they should be going best non-center available. I don't think they are in a place where they should be trying to get a point guard solely, only because I think that there isn't like a true number one point guard available in this class. I don't see that guy out there necessarily. So let's say they get a top 3 pick. I would be more comfortable doing like a Ricochet,
Cody Williams.
a Cody Williams, if you really buy him, or like if you just love Reed Shepherd, or if you love Nikola Topic, that's fine. Take them, but like know that you still might go out and like go get another star point guard down the road. So I think they just take the best guy available at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where we're at. And I'll be honest, after our episode, I immediately changed my Alex Sarr take. Because walking through that, talking through it, even some people in the chat talking about it, I realized like you're not taking Alex Sarr number 1, no matter what team you are. And that's the only way I could have him in that tier by himself. And so I changed it back where I have 5 or 6 guys. And right now I think it is like, okay, who has the number 1 pick? Who makes the most sense?
I think you can take Alex at number 1 if you're certain teams and you just think he's the best player. Like if you're Portland, if you're honestly, like if you're Detroit and like you think he can play the 4, like that's kind of how you make Jalen Duren work as big right now. If you're Washington, like you just take the best prospect that you have on your board, right? I think there are teams that you can do it with, but I think that it's less likely, I guess.
So yeah, like I still have him, to be clear, I still have him number 1. I'm just saying I can't have him number 1 based on I can't have him in his own tier based on my draft philosophy, because then that means 30 out of 30 teams would take him no matter what. And I think there may be a few teams where you would have to skip to a different tier. So anyway,
that's right. Yeah, no, that's the way to put it for sure.
I'm with you on the Spurs in terms of, like Ricochet, Cody Williams, those wings make sense. And like I still think Topic, makes sense. But like, as you said, knowing that you may have to eventually upgrade that depending on how good he ends up being. And again, I'm really interested to see when he gets back from the injury and watch some more of these games to see kind of what I feel like the ceiling is for him.
Think that's right. Is Kuzma really only worth a first rounder from Jeffrey Chan? No, I think he's worth more than that on this contract for sure. Yeah, like the thing I've always said is like a first plus like maybe a young player. Like when it was the Pistons, like my idea was like Marcus Sasser in a first or something like that. Like, late first round pick, has shown that he can play a little bit, probably has maintained that late first round value, and then you get an additional first on top of that. From Rohan, is Jeremy Grant a better fit on the Kings than Kyle Kuzma? Not for me, given the contract.
I was gonna say, play wise, there's an argument for play wise though, because of what Jeremy is defensively.
I think Kyle can be fine defensively. Like
okay.
I don't think either of them are like truly, super high end difference makers on that end. So yeah.
Okay.
From Brian Roby, thoughts on Mark Stein reporting earlier today that Charlotte wants Josh Green back in any PJ Washington to the Mavs deal. As a Mavericks fan, they can have Josh Grant in a second for PJ and Richards right now. That's interesting. It's an interesting move. I mean, the thing is that does clear a little bit of space for them off the top of my head, because PJ and Richards make like 21, and then Josh next year is at like 14. Grant is at like 13. So it'd be, they'd save something like 5 or 6 million, give them a little bit more flexibility. I think it's just kind of filling one hole to solve another, though, I guess, if you're Dallas, like if you're moving Josh Green a little bit. I don't know. Like, is PJ Washington such an upgrade over Josh?
I like Josh Green. So I think he's a quality player. I'm trying like PJ at the 4 for them makes sense. And then you get Nick Richards as the backup. I mean, that's pretty good 48 minutes now between Lively and Nick Richards that fits what they need there. So I like that. And I like PJ Washington, to be clear, as well. So I'm on.
Yeah, I'm not totally sure. Not totally sure what to do with that. It's not bad. Like if I was them, like I'd rather do Hayward, I think, than PJ. Like I'd rather have Hayward keep his bird rights and then get flexible long term, right?
Is that enough for Charlotte in that deal? Like I like Josh Green, but giving up
I mean, if they
PJ.
like Josh Green, then yeah.
Okay.
I mean, if you really like Josh Green, then like Josh Green for PJ. I don't know though, because like Josh only has one more year of team control, and he is like a little bit more expensive. And PJ is better the more you think about it. And Grant is like something of a negative deal. They would have to like Grant Williams. They would really have to like Grant Williams.
That's what I was gonna say. Like the more I look at that, I'm like, I'm not sure if Charlotte's getting the value they should for PJ and Richards in that deal.
I think it'd have to be a little bit more.
I agree.
Corey Zanoni asks about landing spots for Killian Hayes. I mean, none. Honestly, like here's the thing. Again, he has gotten more opportunity with Detroit than anyone else. Like Washington, if they move Tyus Jones, maybe. Maybe that's an interesting one. And do the French connection with him and Bilal, something like that. San Antonio, maybe, like they could use point guard depth. Maybe the French connection with Victor Wembanyama. San Antonio and Charlotte, maybe, or San Antonio and Washington, I think, are the two that, maybe Charlotte even as well, having thought about it. But yeah, like one of those teams, I think.
I'm truly just as someone that's watched his entire career and felt like he's struggled with confidence at times and some of that stuff. And this is not me reporting. I am not an insider. I have no intel, anything, like just me watching from every minute he's ever played from my couch. I'm interested to see where he ends up. Does he get a chance? I saw someone earlier say they think he'd be better on a team with a bunch of scorers where or someone says they should turn him into a wing like like Dante Exum and stuff like that. I'm just interested. Like, I hope for his sake he figures it out. And it was like hey, it just wasn't going to work out in Detroit for whatever reason because they drafted Cade and they drafted Jaden and all of that. I am fascinated to see where his career goes from here.
Yeah. From Jeffrey Chan, if Furphy keeps up this type of production, is he going top 10? I have Johnny Furphy right now pretty damn close to the lottery. So the answer to this is yes for me.
I'm always slow to react to these things. So I have Johnny Furphy a couple weeks ago was in so I have like my top 100. I have the next guys up, and then I have like 75 prospects in my not 2024 guys, like guys that I've watched that I think are potential draft picks. Furphy was in that list until like 2 weeks ago. Yeah. And so the fact I don't have him that high just speaks more to I'm a little bit cautious making crazy jumps, but he went from my not 2024 list to very high on my board pretty quick. And I finally got to watch a full game yesterday, and yeah, he's exciting. He's intriguing.
Yeah. Like, again, like I brought this up last time, but like trying to compare him and Modest is an interesting one just because they're both about the same size. Furphy, I think, has just been more functional like when I've watched them play. Uh, like I trust, like I guess I trust Modest. They're both like fine in help defense, but like neither of them are good on the ball right now. I think Furphy's just a better shooter, and they're similar level, like super high level athletes. So I think I would have Furphy over Modest right now is kind of my immediate reaction, right?
I mean, I will say I put him on like he gets in a stance and he's engaged defensively, Furphy. So like
Furphy wants to defend. He's just really bad at it right now.
yeah.
Like I think that if he can figure out like I need to get lower and like actually slide as opposed to like standing up high and like kind of hopping around a little bit, he'll be okay, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I'm glad he got that, like he got out in transition and put down a dunk. Cause like and you were able to see the athleticism a little bit and all of that. So, Furphy he's really, really interesting.
Yeah. Is Sam's new draft board or mock out yet? No, we're going to wait post deadline and that'll get released at the Athletic. Where does Andre Drummond end up and how happy should his new team be about this? Honestly, there's a significant like dearth of cheap, backup centers out there. And he is very capable of that. Like he can play that role at a really solid level. If you need somebody to eat 12 minutes in the playoffs, like Andre Drummond is fine to be able to do that. If you need somebody, and like hopefully you're only having to meet 8 minutes in the playoffs. If your big can play 40. So yeah, I think Drummond is like a completely useful person to have. Okay. I said we go for an additional 10 and we went an additional 10. Thank you all for the questions. I really appreciate every single one of you. Bryce, I feel like these are even getting more and more fun as we do them. I'm having a great time doing this show.
Well, that's good to hear because you can get rid of me anytime you want. So hearing you say you're enjoying them is always good for me because that keeps me employed here at the Game Theory Podcast with Sam Vecenie. Yeah, the crazy thing was we didn't even get through all of the outline, like even close. I had a whole we had the Cavs and Knicks whole section. We had the 15-man also. We do not have to get into it because it'll go way too long. It always it amazes me because you sent me this morning and I'm like, man, this might be an hour episode. Like we may get this one done in an hour. Nope. Not only did we not get it done in an hour, we didn't even get to all of the stuff that we had on the outline. So I love it.
No. Bryce, tell the people where they can find you and where they can find everything else you've got going.
Yeah, so at Motor City Hoops on Twitter, if it's Piston stuff, but more and more guys, NBA draft, general NBA, all of that. And if you want to hear about Killian Hayes and what's next and all of that, me and my co-host Amari Sankofa II will be live on Monday evening with our podcast, The Pistons Pulse. So if you're a Pistons fan, tune into that. But trade deadline coming up this week. I'm excited. Hopefully be going live sometime throughout all of that when some stuff happens and talking about all of it. And me as well, Sam. I truly, truly enjoy it every time. Like no matter what my mood is, I come in, I sit down, I do this, and my energy level skyrockets. So,
and it's a great time. What I can assure you guys is that we will definitely be going live after the deadline on Thursday. That I know for a fact. If more trades happen before then, I will definitely go live and we'll talk through them. And like, especially if they're more significant ones, we'll do that. But as of right now, the game plan is to have Bryce and I go live immediately after the deadline. It'll be at like 3:30 your time.
3:30 yeah, 3:30 Central is based on my schedule is the earliest we could go. But yep.
Yeah. And we'll do something along those lines. Other than that, I'll be writing at The Athletic almost assuredly on trades this week. That will be a thing. And we'll kind of go from there. But keep it locked here. Go to The Athletic. Keep me employed over there. Until next time, though, we'll talk soon.